The vast majority of the general public believes that there are many different cultures that evolved separately, developed separately, and possibly share some traits only because of mere coincidence. This argument becomes less probable, however, when confronted with archaeological similarities found with a worldwide distribution, whether it be symbolic, such as the swastika symbol found all over the world, going back into the Ice Age, or linguistic, such as the over 200 known Indo-European or Aryan languages that share root words and mythological similarities from Ireland to India and beyond. But what really makes the diffusionist argument self-evident is in the fossil and genetic record, because unlike the modern world's political environment, where anyone can identify with any gender they want, or where anyone can identify with any race they want just because they said so, that's not how it works in physical anthropology. If I sequence a specimen's DNA and it comes back with a Y chromosome, that's it, it's male. And if it belongs to a certain haplogroup, which means it belongs to a certain genetic population that shares a common ancestor, then it's because it inherited that group of alleles, and not because of subjective feelings, emotions, or politics. In today's episode, I'd like to talk about some occult symbolism and explain some ancient knowledge only available to secret societies. But for it to make sense, we'll first need to have a short anthropology lesson. As I just said, a haplogroup implies ancestry from a certain lineage, and it can be male or female. The men pass on a Y chromosome, and in women we look at mitochondrial DNA, also called mtDNA. In the case of haplogroup X, we're examining the maternal line, the mtDNA, which arose around 35,000 years ago with Cro-Magnon. Cro-Magnon just means big cave, where the first specimen was found in the Pyrenees between Spain and France, and where the modern Basque people live. When we look up haplogroup X in Wikipedia, for example, we're given this map, which I find very misleading, with no certainty on its origins. So what I did was split the map in half and then rearranged it so that it more accurately reflects the genetic distribution, which is found in both Europe and North America, surrounding the Atlantic Ocean on both sides. First appearing about 35,000 years ago, haplogroup X had two major splits, one about 20,000 years ago and the other about 12,000 years ago, when, according to Plato, Atlantis allegedly was submerged below the sea. This becomes interesting when we look at the map from the Pleistocene, such as this one from about 16,000 years ago, which is in between those dates, when sea levels were 400 feet lower than they are today, and much of the mid-Atlantic ridge was above the water. Of course, there are still islands there today that are above the sea level called Azores, but during the Ice Age, they had much more exposed landmass, and according to legend, were populated by a seafaring civilization. So, in anthropological terms, Cro-Magnon was haplogroup X, and in mythological terms, was the race known as Atlantean. Haplogroup X is found in approximately 7% of native Europeans and 3% of all native North Americans, which explains many of the ancient Caucasian-type skulls in the fossil record of the New World, and also roughly resembles the distribution of Rh-negative blood type, which in my book I also attribute to Cro-Magnon or Atlanteans. Incidentally, the Basque people, who are direct descendants of Cro-Magnon, and where Cro-Magnon was first discovered, have among the highest concentration of Rh-negative blood in the world. They also share genetic affinities with the native North African Caucasian people, which in modern times carry about 8% sub-Saharan African genetics, but this was not always the case, as the light-skinned, light-haired, and light-eyed Cro-Magnon has occupied North Africa for over 30,000 years, and the sub-Saharan African genetics are recent additions, primarily from mixing during Islamic slave trade of the Holocene. Haplogroup X is also strongly represented around the Caucasus region, which geographically is around modern Turkey, and in a biblical context is where Noah was said to have settled after the deluge. So there are high concentrations in Georgia, in Scotland, interestingly enough, and I've included a link in the description to explain why that is, and in a population found in modern Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, which many people have never heard of, called the Druze. Their emblem is a pentagram, which is a 5-pointed star, and their religion, while officially Islamic, retains ancient mystery school teachings which closely resemble ancient Gnosticism, and while distinct, shares philosophies with aspects of Hinduism, Neoplatonism, and Pythagoreanism. They believe in reincarnation of the soul, but also in certain esoteric and secret teachings, as well as interpretation of scripture, which leads to an end of the reincarnation cycle, similar to certain Buddhist sects, and a reunification with the cosmic mind, or God if you prefer. So let us get back to the story of Atlantis, and these various pieces of the puzzle will hopefully fall into place quite nicely. According to the ancient Egyptian priests, via Solon and Plato, Atlantis was an empire that came from the direction of the Atlantic with the intention of enslaving the civilizations of the Mediterranean. This was regarded as a war of the gods, or titans, and fought between a parent race, meaning an older race, and a younger race that stemmed from it. There are multiple layers to mythology, and one way to look at it is the Atlanteans are represented by Saturn, and the Athenian or ancient Greeks are represented as Zeus. So when you think of Saturn being the father of Zeus, we can understand this as a split in more recent times, genetically speaking, as haplogroup R1a and R1b. Now keep in mind this is not traced by mitochondrial DNA, which is the maternal line, but instead by the Y chromosome. And there's a reason for this, as there was a major shift after the Great War of the Gods. To quote Plato from his work Critias and Timaeus, "Many great and wonderful deeds are recorded of your state in our histories, but one of them exceeds all the rest in greatness and valor. For these histories tell of a mighty power which, unprovoked, made an expedition against the whole of Europe and Asia, and to which your city put an end. This power came forth out of the Atlantic Ocean. Now in this island of Atlantis there was a great and wonderful empire, which had rule over the whole island and several others, and over parts of the continent, and, furthermore, the men of Atlantis had subjected the parts of Libya within the columns of Hercules as far as Egypt, and of Europe as far as Tyrrhenia. This vast power, gathered into one, endeavored to subdue at a blow our country, and yours, and the whole of the region within the straits. And then, Solon, your country shone forth, in the excellence of her virtue and strength, among all mankind. She was preeminent in courage and military skill, and was the leader of the Hellenes. And when the rest fell off from her, being compelled to stand alone, after having undergone the very extremity of danger, she defeated and triumphed over the invaders, and preserved from slavery those who were not yet subjugated, and generously liberated all the rest of us who dwell within the pillars. But afterwards there occurred violent earthquakes and floods. In a single day and night of misfortune, all your warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared in the depths of the sea." In ancient times, during the time of the Atlantean Empire, or the Golden Age, and keep in mind that in mythology Saturn ruled during the Golden Age, and during this time the rulers were female, and civilizations were organized around what we called matriarchy. There's much archaeological evidence for this, for example in ancient pre-Incan Peru, which I'll cover in a future video. There's no question that women were not only highly revered, but wielded all the power, and there are some very important reasons for this, which has been hidden from the public for many centuries and even millennia, and only survives in certain esoteric mystery schools and in what today is labeled as the occult. The Atlantean matriarchal civilization was represented by a serpent, as the serpent was associated with the ancient goddess religion, which required a priestess to achieve spiritual illumination and expansion. This can mean a snake, a dragon, or a sea monster. So when I say serpent, that's what I'm referring to. As Plato tells us, just before the major cataclysms that destroyed their home and submerged it below the waves, the Atlantean forces that had invaded and conquered the entire Mediterranean were at the last moment defeated by their offspring colony, which we already identified with Zeus and symbolically with the eagle. So the matriarchal Atlanteans, or serpent race, or snake people if you prefer, were defeated by the younger race or colony, which we can associate with the eagle, as the eagle was the symbol of Zeus and the civilization that has dominated the Holocene, evident anywhere you see an eagle, whether it's the emblem of ancient Rome or the emblem of Romania, Poland, Philippines, Montenegro, Austria, Albania, Russia, where in the center a dragon is being killed, Serbia, Indonesia, Iraqi Kurdistan, Kazakhstan, Sri Lanka, the United States, nationalist Germany, which I'll get back to in just a moment, or Mexico, which is very interesting, as in Mexico, not only do we have the eagle, but the eagle is almost always portrayed with a snake in its mouth, symbolizing who won the war of the gods. But the war is not over, as we'll soon find out. So the people of the eagle did a lot of genetic mixing with the remnants of the snake people, which one should not confuse with other misinterpretations of serpent symbology. They were not reptilians, but the serpent represents prana, chi, orgone, vril, or life force that is brought about by esoteric practices and techniques with a priestess in the goddess role, harnessed and transmuted into higher spiritual energy. The reason I mention this mixing is because it would be an oversimplification to identify them exclusively with a certain haplotype, as it tends to complicate the matter, except to say that there was a high degree of Rh negative blood type, which is why this characteristic is dominant in all European royal families, and why the royals are called blue bloods. Both the Atlanteans and the Aryans valued genetic purity, and this came from their long-held belief that their noble lineage had a greater natural, psychic endowment when it came to esoteric mysticism. This is the true meaning behind the Holy Grail symbolism, as well as the serpent, as it is associated with enlightenment itself and carries on into the afterlife, and is only achievable through a woman. This is the true hidden and secret understanding behind why women have been largely suppressed and subdued over the past 10 to 12,000 years, and why secret societies were established in the first place, for two primary reasons. One being to protect this particular bloodline, whose female priestesses were regarded as most effective in esoteric activities, and second, the sacred knowledge that is attained only through what some call divine feminine energy. This knowledge has been hidden since the time of Atlantis, and is the core of the subject known as alchemy, as well as the true original Gnosticism, which in a Christian context revolves around Mary Magdalene. That said, the patriarchal civilizations, which I've associated with the eagle, as well as the Aryans, which is a term that describes a period of expansion during the Bronze Age, or the Age of Aries, associated with the ram, whose remnants can also be affiliated with what in modern times are a group associated with a star made of two intersecting triangles. These two bloodlines, which started from one original bloodline, have been at war for thousands of years and have largely been intertwined and have infiltrated each other's organizations so much that in modern times it becomes difficult to distinguish them apart. For example, while nationalist Germany had a large eagle as an emblem representing the Aryan faction, it also had internal organizations which used the serpent symbology, and not only did government-funded esoteric research into the occult, but government-funded archaeological research into Atlantis itself. Now let's listen to a brief excerpt from an interview with author Tua Tia L. Douglas, who writes about ancient lineages and blood types, particularly rhesus negative, which includes a very interesting perspective. Even though I differ from her on some points, I'd still like to include what she has to say in this presentation, as it adds some rarely discussed insights. So let's have a listen.
Tonight on the show, I'm pretty excited because this is something really cool. Finding out your personality through your blood type. This is something I actually haven't heard.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard of like numerology and all these different things, but blood type. Now, maybe that's why Dracula's so good at reading people, because he drinks so many people's blood, he immediately knows what kind of personality they are by smelling it out.
That's right.
You know what I mean? But I'm excited because T.L.L. Douglas is here with us tonight. Tia, welcome to the show. Explain to our friends worldwide exactly what the heck is this ability to know people's personalities through their blood types.
I was writing a book about genetics and anthropology, and through that I was talking about rhesus negative blood. I was getting to know the different types of blood that everybody had who I was communicating with, and I started to notice patterns in people's personalities, and it was quite strong, the differences, and I could start to predict which blood type a person was just from talking to them.
Specifically, the Rh negative blood type, is that something special in your opinion, or not?
Well, it's not a case of it being special, it's just different. Whereas most people who do blood type personalities don't even consider the Rh factor, I actually have a completely separate 4 set of personalities based on the Rh factor as well.
I'm loving this. This is something else. I think this is fascinating because I think it's really cool that, clear across the globe, you can tell someone's personality just by their blood type. And the fact that you've studied this enough to see a pattern like this, it's kind of mind-boggling, actually.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because you do see the same personalities over and over again with the different blood types. It's quite spooky how accurate it can be.
I do think that it's really exciting that, you have basically the ability to go through and kind of figure out if it's even someone that you're going to want to talk to or get involved with or anything, because you can already tell their personality type from that.
I wonder if it has any. Are there any matchmaking capabilities to it, like a dating service where you give your blood to someone?
That's kind of a cool question there, actually, Tia. What do you think of that? Can you kind of tell if people are going to be compatible by this blood type deal?
With the Rh factor, it's really important, really, that you should only, if you're going to have children, you should really be with another Rh negative, because otherwise there could be problems. So it is always better to be with your own type if possible. If a positive male will have a baby with a negative female, the baby might come out positive, and that could cause trouble for the mother rather than the baby, or the baby could and then the other way around, it could be that the child is negative and the mother is positive, and that could cause trouble for the child because it could get some of the mother's positive blood into its system, which could be very bad news and kill it.
No. We're talking about death here. Okay, I got you.
The first child through a mixed couple can usually be born okay, but then the mother's body builds up antibodies, and it will cause the child to die. It attacks it. It actually sees it as a foreign object.
It's actually a health issue. Yeah.
I want to hear about the serpent bloodline.
Yeah.
And Mary Magdalene and the history of her in your perspective as related to Christ, right?
Wow.
So that's really the main subject here. So let's go there if we can.
Okay. Mary Magdalene and Jesus were actually Gnostics, not nothing to do with Jewishness or Christian. Well, obviously Christianity came about after Jesus, but all religions are based on Gnosticism and astrotheology. And Judaism was based on the age of Aries. So they have the ram, what do they call it, the shofar thing that they blow, the ram horn. And then when that religion ended, they moved into the age of Pisces, which is Christianity, and that's why they call Jesus the Fisher King, and he has a fish as his symbol because it's Pisces.
Right.
Oh.
So these people who in the past were enlightened they sort of thought Jesus was an enlightened person, so they would use his image to set up the new religion for the new age of Pisces. It doesn't necessarily mean he was any different to anybody else, other than he had done the great work, which is a spiritual thing where you come to know yourself, you know. So it wasn't anything. He wasn't any different. He wasn't a god or anything like that. He was just a man.
Okay.
Basically an inspiration, kind of.
Yeah, like philosophizer.
But what about Mary?
Well, she was his teacher.
Okay. So she wasn't like a who was the prostitute? Which one was the prostitute?
No,
Mary Mag.
Yeah.
They say that. They say that she was a prostitute, but that's because they don't understand what the Great Rite is about. And the Great Rite is about tantric sex, where the female passes some of her energy to the male, and that causes his kundalini to rise up his spine and causes enlightenment.
I think your kundalini just rose, Chris. You better watch yourself. I love this because this is really great. So Mary Magdalene was his teacher, but they got it wrong when they wrote about her, when they called her a prostitute, because they didn't understand the actual language or the actual
right
what she was actually doing.
I think, did Jesus have children? That's what I'm kind of leaning
You're
towards,
jumping
right?
all over the place here. I'm still on Mary Magdalene. I'm enjoying finding out about her because shit's pretty cool.
Why?
Yeah, that is really cool.
To hear that she, because people just didn't understand who she was. That's what I think is really cool. Tia, what kind of elaborate just a little bit before we jump to the children of Jesus.
All right. Well, yeah.
That Chris is hoping are alien grays. Let's take for a second and go back to Mary Magdalene. I'm really excited about this because do you think it's maybe just because they didn't understand her role or what she was to Jesus, and that's why they called her that? Or was it maybe just because people were jealous of her in those days? What do you think it was?
Well, it's a case of there's been certain males who've tried to run things from the start, really, and they don't like it when women have any kind of power.
Where was Mary Magdalene in Jesus's, life?
Well, she would be equivalent to how a man and wife today.
So that's all. She was just a wife.
Not just a wife. I guess in those days they didn't have the traditional religious marriage ceremonies. It was more like a hand fasting.
Gotcha.
And and they did have children.
Okay, so she was.
And they did have children.
Yes.
Okay.
How many?
6.
Wow.
And this runs into the serpent bloodline, correct? So.
Oh yeah, they were of the serpent bloodline.
What exactly does that mean? That makes me think of the Church of Set when I hear stuff like that. What exactly is the serpent bloodline? Explain that to our friends, because I'm sure everyone's going, what is that?
That particular bloodline had the serpent as their symbology. They weren't literally serpents or reptiles like David Icke says. It was a case of on their family crests and coats of arms they had salamanders, dragons, serpents, and it was all to do with the fact about this symbolism of the kundalini energy when you're enlightened.
Gotcha. Yeah. So when you say the secrets of the serpent or the serpent bloodline or anything like that, it makes me almost go back to the Garden of Eden and that whole lineage from that time. So that's why it's because they're supposedly children of the serpent were the original, mankind, because they were tainted and changed by the serpent, quote unquote, all that biblical stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's why I really wanted to know, because it's kind of the serpent bloodline. It almost sounds like something kind of from a cool medieval movie.
No, yeah, I was actually thinking Harry Potter. I just,
Slytherin.
No, yeah, exactly, Slytherin. Yeah,
that's pretty cool. But yours is the closest because they have the symbolism and everything. So that's
that they really go deep into blood relations too in Harry Potter. So.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh no, yeah, that's yeah.
Tells you what I know.
Can you trace that lineage all the way to today with the bloodline?
Oh yeah.
So Jesus has great grandkids running around, and one of them hopefully is not Donald Trump.
It could be me, or you,
it could be,
or Alex,
it could be,
or Amanda. We just don't know, right? So I mean, how?
Well, Tia might know. She might know.
Yeah.
Yeah, the families do know.
The families do, but now you yourself, are you privy to that information, or they kind of kept you out of that?
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah.
I'm not going to press you to tell me.
Why not?
Because I know.
Yeah, I want to know.
If she wanted to tell us, it would have already been told.
Well, I guess I'm wondering how many descendants.
Well, it's got to be 16 or 17, right?
Even more, maybe.
1,000?
Yeah.
There are about 10,000 bloodline families who are members of the bloodline family today. About 10,000.
Well, and I love that. I love the fact that they're still around today. And is this true of a lot of bloodlines? Do you find? And let me ask you this: and I don't know if you use the Bible in any of this at all, because it seems like your version completely kind of kicks the Bible version out. But if all bloodlines came from one bloodline, that seems like a little mind-boggling to me, that now there's so many different bloodlines. How do you, when you trace something back, how do you find where the bloodline originated, and does it all lead back to one source, or does it lead back to many sources? And to add to that question, which is a pain, I know, a lot of people say that some of our lineage comes from, like, maybe not just other areas of the earth, but maybe even visitors to the earth, going back to Chris's alien thing. The Egyptians and the Toltecs and the Aztecs and all these people that had this amazing technology.
And Mayans.
Right, and the Mayans. I was getting ready to go there.
No, you weren't.
Does this all lead to these same places? Does it all go to one bloodline, or are these all maybe different bloodlines from different beings?
Well, if you go far back enough, we're all from... The Earth was seeded from a star, a dying sun. So... you could say in that case that we're all aliens in a way. But if you do go far back enough, the first bloodline was the serpent bloodline. But they decided when they saw they were evolved from aquatic apes rather than land apes, and it was in the Tigris region in it's now called Iran.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then as they spread out further into the earth, they found some land apes that were sort of a bit like chimps or apes or gorillas are today, and they decided that they would try and mix some of their genes with these apes, and that's what created the Adams and the Eves. It wasn't an Adam and an Eve; it was Adams and the Eves.
Okay.
Oh, so like Neanderthals, that's why they say Neanderthals are like us, similar to a lot of us, but not exactly the same.
Right. Or Cro-Magnon, any of those type of people, yeah.
Yeah, because I heard, I don't know.
Well, they're missing a chromosome or two, right?
Like I've heard that some people have DNA of like Neanderthals and some people don't.
Right, it goes back.
Which when I was a kid, I thought that everyone it was just like a straight line. It wasn't like mixing and,
Right. And I kind of thought as a kid maybe they're both right because you have both theories, the creationism versus the evolution.
Yeah, where do you find all this information that you've gotten? Like, have you just looked it up and learned it, or is there a certain source that you go to?
It's been passed down through the family. But they were actually the most advanced first humans and extremely intelligent compared to the land apes that they found and gave some of their genes to.
It seems like a lot of times, for some reason, our modern age and our modern sciences and the way they teach us in school, they kind of want to look down on ancient civilizations. But the more we learn about ancient civilizations, the more we see, man, they were brilliant. I mean, the science was there, the technology was there. And I believe with Neanderthals, I mean, all the discoveries they made, they had to be intelligent beings.
Well, I have a confession to make. I've never
you're
heard
Neanderthal?
of a...
Yes.
I
knew.
have never heard of an aquatic ape.
Yeah, that's pretty
I've
cool.
never heard of that.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
I mean, is that like, I don't know. Do you believe in any of the Atlantis stuff?
There will be cities under the sea that were advanced because Serpent Bloodline people built civilizations all over the world. And if you talk to the people who know about the past, they'll always say it was the serpent people who came and built this, and they were fair-skinned and they had red hair and blue eyes, or blonde hair and blue eyes. They'll never say that they looked the same as them.
Wow.
The ones who they thought were like gods, because they had this advanced technology that they brought to them.
I actually knew about that. Yeah, about the trying to change the shape of the skull and all that. I remember reading stuff about that. I didn't know it was tied in like that. That's pretty amazing. All this is pretty mind-boggling stuff when you really look at it.
You can get into the Templars, right?
Yeah.
And their evolution in North America.
Now, the Templars probably knew all this. Tia, did the Templars know all this information?
Well, the real Gnostic Templars that do, yes.
Wow.
Not the fake Christian Templars that came later.
Right. That's cool because the Knights Templar. That's pretty neat because it seems to me like a lot of maybe groups that we're taught are pagan or we're taught are, is clandestine or whatever.
Yeah, they're not pagan at all.
No, they probably know all this stuff, and that's why it seems a lot of times I feel like the church, like the Christian church, tries to suppress so much information,
right,
for whatever reason, for maybe it's an agenda issue or whatever. But I do feel like in a situation like that, like you have all these ancient groups that know this information, and no one else is allowed to have it. That's kind of crazy. So Tia, I'm glad that you're able to do this. Of course, they probably don't, like, the Christian community probably paints this as blasphemy, but it's how do people receive this information when you're giving it to them or when they read your book? How do you get the reception of it? How does that seem to you?
I've had so much trouble over the stuff I've put out because I was basically told you shouldn't do this, people aren't ready to hear it. And for thousands of years, our families have hidden because we've been burnt at the stake, tracked down, and, told we're not allowed to tell anybody this stuff. And they basically want us to be wiped out completely so that we can't say anything about it. But, I've had so much trouble. There's a certain organisation. When I told you about the Adams and the Eves, some of the Serpent Bloodline males decided that they wanted to breed with these new females, and that created another line that was more pure than the Adams and Eves, and that was the formation of the Eagle Bloodline. Now, it sounds silly, but they use eagle. Everywhere you see an eagle, it's that bloodline that are in control, and they've wanted to hide this truth because to them it hurts them to know that they are not the ones, the originals, they're hybrids.
And certainly the eagles would go back to the Knights Templar for sure, right? I mean,
well, I'm even thinking the Native Americans. It was all about the eagles. Everything.
True.
Painted everywhere. It was on their everything. It was on the side of their teepees.
No, I agree.
Yeah, everywhere. So what's up with the eagles? With the Native Americans?
Well, they did wipe out the serpent bloodline from the Americas when they got there. They called us giants, red-headed monsters, and tried to kill us all off. And in fact, I think they actually did. Some of them still have some of the hair woven into their outfits, the red hair that they got from these giants, and they're quite small people. So a big, tall, white person with big limbs and everything would look like giants to them.
Oh, there's plenty of evidence of them discovering giant bones of humans, all over North America. I mean, just recently we've had huge discoveries of giants.
I was hoping those were Wookiees.
No jokes.
No, I agree.
Serious.
I agree.
This is horrifying to know.
It is horrifying, but it's also.
I don't think it's horrifying. It's very interesting.
Well, the horrifying part is that
Genocide.
the genocide
yeah.
of an entire bunch of people just because they had serpent blood. That's kind of awful.
No, definitely. I mean that seems to happen a lot throughout history.
It does.
Yeah.
It seems like there's this group and they don't want the truth out, or they feel inferior and they have to just take out
Pride.
people. Yeah,
A lot of pride.
a lot of arrogance.
Is what it sounds like.
It's awful. Well, I'm sorry that your family's been suppressed for so many years. That's awful to you. But at the same time, I'm glad that you're out there doing this work and bringing this to the public.
Oh, we love it. Yeah.
There's so much to touch on. I wish, I don't know.
It's
You
a lot.
can get into the Cup of Christ, the Holy Grail.
Yeah, tell me a bit about that.
Oak Island. You have any info on Oak Island?
You just took off with my Grail. I wanted to know about the Grail.
Well, the Grail was Mary Magdalene. She was the first, because they said her womb was the Grail, the Holy Grail, because she produced the bloodline children.
How the heck did King Arthur go looking for that?
We're getting a little mixed up here, maybe.
That's
Go ahead,
really
Tia.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, they do the search for the Grail because they want to find the bloodline.
I gotcha. So when they said because apparently there's some truth to the King Arthur legend about the search for the Grail, and if they were searching for this and it actually was a woman who I'm sure was deceased by that point, what were they looking for? Were they trying to find her remains?
The bloodline, the children.
I gotcha.
Descendants.
That's so interesting. It's like the legend is almost interpreted wrong.
Right. Because I'm sitting here thinking about a cup.
Yeah, literally. Instead
It's
of
not the
metaphor-
cup, right? It's the line. It's the
That's the
bloodline.
blood-
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
Can I just say this though? During our ceremonies, we have a chalice which represents the womb, and the sword that goes into it represents the penis.
Well, there you go.
That's awesome.
There you go.
I mean, was there an actual cup of Christ that may have been collected or hoarded by the Knights Templar?
No, it's most of this stuff is all allegory, and it's basically just to fool people into thinking things are different to they actually are. It's like you see all these pictures of knights slaying the dragon, and they've got eagles on their armour. Why do you think that is? It's because they're thinking they're slaughtering the bloodline of that they don't want people to know about.
So King Arthur was going to go out and kill a bunch of people.
Well, the weird thing, this kind of ruins Excalibur completely. But the weird thing about it is that it all kind of makes sense when you really look at it through this viewpoint of, because you go through, it is true. They're always, St. George is always, taking out the dragon and, things like that. And especially in European lore and everything seems to be tied into, always the holy knights taking out the bad dragons and the serpents.
I agree completely. It could very well be that the,
it's all symbolic.
Yeah, it's all symbolic. The cup of Christ was not the cup of Christ. It was the
Vagina of Mary.
the feminine the feminine aspect of Christ.
I like that a lot because I love, looking at, because I just feel like writers in general always kind of have some kind of point they're trying to get across.
Even the Bible itself is full of parables and this and that. I mean, we're not really a beast with 7 heads cruising around.
Well, if it's supposed to be a guidebook and all this, the Bible, then according to your interpretations, Tia, where does that leave, like, other people, like other bloodlines, and what's the end game?
The reason why they've created these religions and made it so that all the men are in the power positions is because women are the ones who enlighten people. Like I've told you, it's the symbolic great rite with the chalice and the sword. It is the great rite is the thing that enlightens the male. And the more enlightened people there are in the world, the less they will need them and their religions, and it gives them power to have these religions where you give them money and go to them for your spirituality. If they're discovered that it's all nonsense and set up around astrotheology and that you've been lied to all along, it's going to make people very angry and they're going to turn against them. And there's only a small amount of them and a hell of a lot of people. So as soon as people know, they're not going to stand for it anymore.
There's truth to that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it scares me sometimes, though, because sometimes I feel like people can be really dug into their own version of reality, and even if it is silly to other people, for them, it's a part of them almost. So for them to change their mind on this particular subject, they've already invested so much of themselves into it.
Yeah.
That, like, I don't know, kind of like a pride thing we were talking about, admitting that they're wrong.
Yeah,
Cognitive dissidence.
Yes, that's exactly what I was looking for.
Well, it's also, you there's so many people you meet in religion who you say the sky is blue, the sky is blue. No, it's not. It's purple with polka dots. The sky is blue. It's obviously blue. It's purple polka dots, because they absolutely cannot change their opinion. This is how they were born and raised. We were born and raised Baptists. You cannot live your life. And it's like you cannot change their philosophies or their minds or what they believe. No matter if you have to show. Even if look, I've said it before. Even if they were sitting at a bar stool and Jesus came up and sat down and said, "You're an idiot, you're doing it all wrong," they still wouldn't believe it. They'd say, "You're an imposter," and slap him in the face and leave.
Right.
Because they can't handle anything different than their own small, like, box that they see life in. And in order to understand what Tia is saying, or anybody for that matter that has different philosophies, you have to open your mind to it. You have to be like, hey, I'm not tied to this. I'm open to trying to find out the truth of the universe. For me personally, I want to find out any way I can what is the real meaning of life in the universe and what's going on out there.
It all boils down to the divine phenomenon. That is a concept that, goes through nature, religion, the entire deal.
Well, religion, I think, is man-made, so it's something that goes through mankind, and then they turn it into like a religion, so to speak.
Tia, your thoughts?
Yeah, the divine feminine is the key to freeing people from this slavery that they're under through this eagle bloodline. Because people actually think it's normal to live how we do now in this, how do you say it? It's like a prison without being in a cage. Because you're taught from when you're a child that you have to, when you grow up, you have to pay taxes and go to work and do this and do that to fit in. And they don't realise that all the other animals on the planet don't pay tax and have to do these things. But if you want to live on a piece of land, you have to do what they say. Otherwise, you can't.
Right.
As humans, we are not allowed to live on the planet without paying them taxes and without giving them what they want, which is like basically a life of slavery to them.
It is.
Is that our curse as humans?
No, it has become our curse because there are certain people who run everything, and you might not think they're connected. You might think that the US was free when they got independence from the British Empire, but they never did because it's all run from Switzerland. And all of it, that the World Bank, everything is run from Switzerland by the same bloodline families that have been running it for thousands of years.
All right, consider my mind blown. That's pretty tricky. It's like the female's always pushed down.
Yeah.
And I think this is pretty cool. And I think it's kind of interesting, too, because a lot of times these cells of people who are fighting against government regimes or whatever are named after females, like ISIS came out of nowhere. I don't even know. One day there was no ISIS. The next day there's ISIS. It's named after a female, which also, even though it may not be right, even though it may not be like something where someone knows why it was named that. Someone gave it that name, and I'm sure there was symbolism involved in that too.
No, yeah, and that makes me think about America as a whole and how much we worship the eagle. Like, I'm pretty sure the eagle is like a extremely protected in America, but it's not an endangered species anymore.
Here, God, they almost killed it here in Missouri, but I absolutely love eagles as creatures.
I love all the creatures.
Yeah, but I also like serpents. I like it all. So.
That's what I was gonna say. I like the snakes too.
But as far as bloodlines go, this all makes perfect sense.
That said, we can now start the actual topic of today's episode, which revolves around the concept of Lucifer. As many people are aware, the word Lucifer simply means light bearer, and is a Latin name for the planet Venus in its morning appearances, as it's the first visible bright star one sees before the sun rises. In a mythological and religious context, it is associated with a variety of goddesses, which all are aligned with the planet Venus. One of the symbols associated with the goddess is called the Rose of Venus, or the Pentagram of Venus, because every 8 years it makes a pentagram shape in the sky when you trace its orbit. This is the same pentagram, or five-pointed star, used by the Druze people that I mentioned earlier, as well as other occult organizations. It is also why goddesses such as the Sumerian Inanna or the Babylonian Ishtar is represented by an 8-pointed star for the 8 years. So the number 5 and the number 8 is closely associated with Venus and therefore the goddess. I'd also like to point out that for every 8 Earth years, Venus goes around the sun 13 times. And the number 13 is also associated with the lunar cycle, another goddess affiliation, and why the number has been deemed as evil, unlucky, or in some cases banned outright. The word Satan means adversary, and from the perspective of the patriarchal civilizations, the secrets of the goddess were to be demonized and hidden, which is what was behind things like the burning of the witches and genocide of the Cathars, who were Gnostics. And gnosis just means knowledge or wisdom, but not the kind from books, but the enlightenment that comes from sacred union with a goddess. The imagery of a horned deity can be traced back to the god Pan, where we get the term for horny from, as he was also affiliated with carnal acts, which is part of the goddess mysteries. So you'll come to find that much of what is called evil or forbidden, including in the Garden of Eden, is because it hides a valuable treasure. The same way that modern Islamic republics hide a woman from head to toe under a black cloth, something that was never done during the time of the Prophet Muhammad. And in the earliest Islamic art, the female body is painted on the walls totally nude. There are many examples of this, one being in eastern Jordan, built around 730 by a future caliph, considered one of the most important examples of early Islamic art and architecture, which at one time was a large castle, but today not much remains besides these frescoes, mainly on the ceiling, with dancing scenes of naked women, and above what was the bath chamber, we find the first known representation of heaven on a hemispherical surface, where the mirror image of the constellations is accompanied by the figures of the zodiac. So it seems there's an increasing suppressive element that has overtaken Islam and hidden its esoteric secrets from the public, but the Muslim leadership seems to be exempt from, whether it be the royal family of Saudi Arabia, which flies in supermodels actresses, and strippers from around the world for private engagements, or the Muslim elite in Iran who legalize prostitution with underage girls but call it temporary marriages, where you can get married overnight and divorce the next day, keeping everything nice and legal. And at the same time, not doing much about acid tossed in the face of women who expose a bit too much of their hair in public. My point is not to make a political statement about any one modern religion, but to draw back the curtain a bit, as I could say the same about Roman Catholicism, whose highest clergy is constantly caught up in scandal, the type that they openly preach against. So it's safe to say that the goddess element has been suppressed or totally eliminated from organized spirituality, and yet, according to all ancient writers, was the central focal point of every civilization going back into the Pleistocene, or Ice Age. And while secret societies were set up to continue to honor the goddess and to protect certain lineages, these same organizations have been infiltrated and have not only degraded into acts of perversion and degeneracy, but actively plot to dilute and destroy the same noble bloodlines that they were set up to uphold and protect. My name is Robert Sepper. I'm an anthropologist. My published work is available on Amazon. My books make a great gift. If you'd like to support my work, you can do that through patreon.com. There should be a link in the description section for those who are interested. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Please hit the like button, subscribe for future updates, and as always, I look forward to reading your thoughts, so please leave a comment below. Have a wonderful weekend, and I hope to see you again soon.